Customers of the Lubeck Public Service District could soon see their bills go up as county officials consider a rate increase. Our Chase Campbell has the latest on the decision-making process.
There was standing room only at Thursday's Wood County Commission meeting for a hearing on a proposed rate increase in the Lubeck Public Service District. The PSD is asking for a roughly 30% increase for water and 14% for sewer, estimated to bring in about $1 million a year in new revenue. PSD officials say that funding is sorely needed. Engineer Kevin Watkins says the district runs on aging, unreliable infrastructure.
Some of Lubeck's water lines are 70 years old, and water lines, they'll break, they'll leak. Lubeck's great about going out and fixing leaks, but you can only fix a certain section of water line so many times. You can only put so many Band-Aids on a asbestos cement water line. Back in February of this year, I believe the Larkmead tank was out of service for approximately 3 weeks, not a month.
That offline tank meant over 500 customers were under a boil advisory for weeks. PSD officials gave a litany of other budget strains. The cost of treatment chemicals has nearly quadrupled, well pumps needing repairs or replacements, regulations requiring they hire additional well operators. As the commissioners and members of the public heard these issues, the same questions arose repeatedly. Where were the details of these projects when the PSD proposed the rate increase? And where are those details now?
I have scores of documents in front of me. Nowhere does it show we have this project we're going to work for. I mean, you're talking about projects and you're talking about extra tanks and you're talking about this, but in this increase for raises, I see no purpose that you're going to spend this money for. That's what really bothers me.
Watkins said the details of any particular engineering project can't be finalized and the specifics released until the rate increase itself is approved. The commissioners still stressed that they want, and ratepayers deserve, more transparency on how the PSD intends to spend the money from the rate increase, particularly how much would cover day-to-day expenses versus projects down the line.
We have to, in my mind, have to separate out operational costs versus engineering costs at a later date. We don't have those costs involved or know exactly what the projects are.
Several ratepayers echoed those sentiments, questioning how long the higher rates would last and what specifically the money would be spent on. Delegate Dave Foggin, who represents Lubeck in the legislature, questioned how the rate increase related to the costs of providing service to the new Lubeck Elementary School. PSD General Manager Rocky McConnell clarified that those costs would be absorbed by the Wood County Board of Education, not the ratepayers. No decision was made at Thursday's meeting. The commission will take up the issue again on Monday. The PSD said it would provide the commissioners with more information and an alternate proposal for a tiered rate increase before that meeting. If the commissioners do not make a decision before August 22nd, the rate increase will go into effect automatically. In Parkersburg, Chase Campbell, WTAP News.